Mitchell Reportingly's podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all that great stuff. Good conversation that's going to be happening today. Hillary, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, let's just jump right into the conversation. Psychology, right?
Yeah.
And the effects of how it can impact on loneliness and things like that. Speak to that from your perspective.
Yeah, I think when we don't have good core coping skills, we tend to isolate and go in self protection mode, and that can lead to feeling lonely. And I always ask individuals if they feel like they're lonely, right? I'm like, are you alone or are you lonely? Because some people really need to be alone to recenter and just recharge themselves. And so there's a distinct difference, and I think you have to really have key self awareness to understand what your emotional processing is and feeling like if I am lonely, like how can I get out of my own way to then go get help?
No, absolutely. Has there ever been a chance, like a time in your creative process or your professional practice where you've experienced loneliness, and how did you overcome that?
It's a real interesting shift because I'm preparing for this like big presidential speech I have to do in October for the Sports Psychology Association. And part of my reflection as an entrepreneur is this framework where we're all on our own island and we're continuously building and we're trying to prove and we're fighting through imposter syndrome and the whole roller coaster of creativity and connective and making it. And oftentimes I hear these stories and I felt it myself, or I reflected and thought that I was alone, and was just like, man, I'm so alone. No one's going through what I'm doing, but this is the sacrifice, this is part of the process, but it feels lonely and it feels isolating. And we just make meaning of like, that's how it's supposed to be when you're in this building creative entrepreneur framework. And then I realized when I stopped and looked up, I actually was never really alone. And I had a lot of bridges that I was very intentional about connecting and building and growing and utilizing. And I needed to get out of my own way to realize like so many people will come to me and help me if I just look up. And so it's our own fault that we feel like we're alone when we're really never alone when we just utilize the people and the surroundings around us.
No, well said. I came out of a conversation yesterday, and the gentleman, shout outs to Money Hoops Club. That's the hat that I'm wearing. And the crazy thing about it is we spoke about the same thing about, finding the right tribe that you have around you
Mhm.
because you need it to build into your success blocks, right? Whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
I've always said success is not always about money. It's nice that we get these fancy paychecks that go in the bank account, but you can never take it to the grave with you. And I think the biggest thing is the value of relationships that you can cultivate to action, right?
Mhm.
Because that's the ones that are going to pick you up and drive you to where it is you're wanting to go. You know what I mean? And things like that.
Yeah. And I think the real indicator of the people that are there are who shows up when you're building or when you need help, not just when you're on top.
No, for sure. And it speaks to a lot about human behavior as well, right?
Mhm.
The common factors that we have to deal with. What do you think are three common factors that a lot of individuals, I know you're into the sports psychology and things like that with athletes, but let's speak to like the human beings. What do you think the three things they struggle with the most?
Well, I think every human wants to feel seen and heard and respected. I think that at our true nature and our core, that we want to feel valued. We want to feel like there's a purpose and a meaning. And so that's generally what we need. We need the validation. We need the connection. We need understanding. And we need people to actually show that they care. At the true essence, we still need people to take care of us.
No, no, for sure. And when you think of like the athlete's standpoint, right? I've
Hmm.
I've played basketball at the summer league, rec league, but there's guys that have played professional or they played
Yeah.
overseas. You know, when you speak to your athletes, what are some things that you help them unlock and things like that?
A lot of them is building their own self autonomy. And I kind of say, hey, you have to be selfish before you can be selfless. And they have to take care of themselves and they have to be true to what are my goals? How am I going to get there? How can I find autonomy in a system while still being a great teammate? But they can only control themselves. And so I'm trying to help them be the best person and human. And I always say, like, let me treat the person within the player. And if I make that person really confident and solid and secure, then everything else is going to have a ripple approach and they're going to be effective.
You've ever had any athletes speak to you about a potential book they should read as like an entry level to help like sharpen that brain? before they
Oh,
get into the psychology aspect, or?
yeah, for sure. Like I get tons of like, which books did I do or where am I at or do you have resources? And I had like a top 10 list that existed and everyone's different. So I first try to say like, what is it they're seeking? Like maybe they want, a Ryan Holiday book on stoicism and kind of leading into that self-reflective process. Maybe they want more of a mental skills training, mental performance tool. And, we might look at my favorite, which I read, which is In Pursuit of Excellence. And it's like an old school book. But there's so many different frameworks. And I just first ask, like, what are you seeking when you want to go learn? Um, and if they're not a reader, I'm like, hey, what are some good YouTubers to follow, podcasts to listen to? Like the audio learning style is so great. I encourage them to seek out resources of people that inspire them. And they can learn that way too, hearing those messages, not just from a book.
I love that. It's kind of speaks to like the Michael Jordan The Last Dance for me.
Yeah.
When you watch that Netflix special, and I tell anyone, if you don't have a Netflix account, ask your friend, get their login. You can, you know what I
Hmm.
mean, figure it out because you learn so much about the heart and soul and the dedication that Michael came with.
Yeah.
And I know some folks look at him and say, oh, well, he was an asshole, but he was a controlled asshole that wanted to improve his teammates and the people around him. So when you look
Yeah.
at guys like Steve Kerr and what he transitioned to being, a 3-point specialist, role player, but now he's a however many time champion as a head coach. You get
Yeah.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like those little things of ebbs and flows of who do you want to not say emulate, but who do you feel like you gravitate to the most, if
Mhm.
that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I say that to all professionals in the field too. It's like find someone who's doing the job that you want and what can you take from them, what can you learn from them. Again, if you don't know them personally, it's just the perspective and perception you're seeing from the window you're looking in of the house that they have, right? But still, look at the patterns, behaviors, learn the traits that they're presenting and say, okay, like let me be curious on how I can get there and how I can improve and how can I make it my own, right? Like
Yeah.
Michael Jordan set a standard and he set the standard of this is how it's going to be and here's what resiliency looks like and here's what failure looks like and here's what vulnerability looks like, by not making certain things and standing up for things and playing the way he played, and he set a standard. And then we had other players that also set standards, and you get to kind of say, hey, do I want to go to the Kobe Bryant era, the Steph Curry, do I want to do Kevin Durant, like Luca? Which player do I want to emulate and work through? They're all different. They've all been wildly successful. And then the other part you look at is what environment will shape you to be successful as well, or enable you to have behaviors that maybe aren't so great.
Absolutely. Well said. Well flippant said. Let's get into even your development, your journey. Was there one person that you were looking at that wanted you to really encompass the sports psychology aspect? Was it a coach? Was it an athlete? Was it a mentor or someone that you came into in life?
No.
Okay.
It's crazy. Like I knew at 14 I wanted to be a sports psychologist. And partly it was because of my own experience. At the time, like I had a really like most sports psychologists were athletes or avid or really good sport fans. For me, I was a great youth sport athlete and had tons of resources. And then I moved to a really small town in Maine, where there is limited resources at the time, especially what I came from. And then I just was winning and I lost my passion. And it sounds so cliche. I was like, oh, winning was easy. But like it was like boring. It was like, where's my challenge? Where's my growth? And then you get the external pressure. And at the time of like a teenager, when I'm already dealing with identity formation, I was like, oh, I just need someone who understands me. And I wanted someone who understood the competitive mind, very different than just mental health. And the irony of all that is like I ended up specializing in mental health in athletes, but because I was a victim of different cultures in my sport journey that weren't great, that like made me feel really ashamed and question things and do choices that didn't feel great for my body and what I felt was successful to win. And I was like, I want to be someone who can help these athletes reach their optimal level of growth and goals with also feeling they're a really great human. Once I got into the field, then I had tons of mentors and people that I just thought were rock stars, like Dr. Robin Veely, who writes a lot of the books of sports psychology, was my master's professor and still a mentor to this day. Like she's just a rock star. Like every nugget that I plug in, I'm like, man, if I'm an ounce of her in my career and impact, like I've made it, right? Because she had such a profound impact in me and so many other people. And I think that's what I truly admire is You can touch one person's life, and that's amazing. But if you have the ability to connect and share the energy and connect with other people at a high level with intentionality and care, now that's powerful impact.
So flippin' true. Like, I'll say this, just that little piece there is how many folks in this social media land, the landscape, if it's YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, threads, you know what I mean? X, Twitter,
Yeah.
we touch so many folks. It could be one, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,000,000, just depending on whatever happens. And some of them are silent inside, right? Because they don't necessarily want to, how do I say this? Maybe give you the credence right away. But if they see you out, it's kind of like, you know what you're doing it's inspiring. And I see that a lot of times I go out, you know what I mean? Where folks that know me know the encompass and the building blocks of this podcast, 8 years.
Right.
Rory, keep going, right? And I'm pretty sure you probably see that within your inner circle as well. You know what I mean? The silent ones that don't really want to say anything, but when they see you, they're giving you that round of applause. They say, hey, listen, I may not listen to all the episodes. I may not watch all the episodes, but I see what you're doing. Hats off.
Yeah, I think, what people don't realize is we're putting ourselves out there in a vulnerable space. And for me, specifically when I wrote my book, right, I wanted to give words to people with the intentionality of like helping them feel seen and heard and helping them make meaning of things. And when I have even just one person, and graciously, I've had a lot more recently, give me feedback, which is beautiful, but it touches my heart when they're like, this word in this chapter like connected and made such a difference for me. Thank you for speaking the words that I've been feeling or helping me make meaning of what I've been trying to work through. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. And it fuels me probably even more than like, I love that they had such an impact and that their growth can happen and they feel seen and heard. Sorry, that they feel seen and heard. But for me, it's like, I feel seen and heard now. Like I did my job. Like I am fueled by them having an impact and feeling successful. And it's so beautiful when you can have that full circle moment of people saying like, this is how much you impacted them.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Yo, guys, what's going on? I appreciate you. Thank you. Turn on all bell notifications, subscribe, like, and comment to the podcast. Why do you feel like some folks struggle with self-esteem, especially when the word is self, next part esteem? Let's speak to that.
Yeah, I think this is my challenge is are they struggling with confidence, which is transactional, situational, shows up, ebbs and flows, or are they actually struggling with the self-esteem and the self-belief in who they are as a person? So first you have to check yourself and say, are you understanding both things, right? Like if you know at your core, you're a great human, you're very talented, you're skilled at these areas, and then I show up in an environment and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I can perform today. I'm a little bit nervous today and I need that feedback from other people to build my confidence up. Then it's a confidence issue. But if it becomes a self-esteem issue and self-worth and you're really having the negative thoughts and you're not feeling like you're worthy and you get your not enough button, which I say we all have, like we have this not enough button. When that button gets pushed enough, then you actually start to say, man, like I feel really sad or I feel really anxious or I feel just alone and not seen. Then we know it's a self-esteem issue and there's some things that we have to like work through. Why I think people struggle in these belief buckets is they're not getting the external rewards. They're not getting the validation. They're not getting the wins. And you have to look at, is there anything in your control that you can find those wins and build it up yourself? Or do we really need it from an external process? And that's the scary part. If you need the dopamine hits from the likes on your social media and the constant affirmations, that will only go so far. You need to have internal self-talk and self-belief to really fuel yourself to be successful.
And now we're getting deep. We're getting real deep now because, it's that external. So many folks, they post a picture or that food pic or that content creation or that like or that reel, and they may see only 200 looks, 200 views. And then they're like, well, my buddy over there is getting 10K per click.
Right.
We're not going to go into the technology aspect. Maybe it's suppression, because I feel like all the social media channels are being suppressed right now because of just what it is. It's just life. It happens as a creator. But it goes down to peeling the layers back and saying, can you identify self first? Right? That's where it goes back to that self-esteem.
Hmm.
Too many times I hear conversations of any man or any woman, this person made me feel this way, but it has to go to you inside of yourself. And then some folks hear me say that and they're like, Rory, why are you so heartless? I'm not, it's not that I'm heartless. I've done the years of the work. You know
Right.
what I mean? And I said in the pandemic, you'll see who's doing the work once we get out. Now we're out of pandemic.
Hmm.
There's no more, you know, lockdowns. This is your time to lock down what it is you want to double down on. Is that your business? Is it that course? Is it that finishing that schooling? Is it traveling? What is it inside self? You know?
Yeah, and we give so much power to other people. And when I peel back the layers, I say, hey, like, do a simple thing. I call it the man in the mirror, right, or the woman in the mirror, and it's like, can you look yourself in the eyes at the end of the day while you're brushing your teeth? Because we all go through a process, hopefully, with dental hygiene. But like when you're getting your bedtime routine, can you look yourself in the eye and say, I showed up today. I did enough today. I'm proud of what I did today, because you are the only person showing up. And that should be where you can go to bed at night and be like, yeah, like I don't have the anxieties because I showed up, and I can look myself back in the eye and be proud of those things. And I challenge people. I said, do the 2-minute man in the mirror drill. Like, just look yourself in the eye, and can you sit with yourself?
I love that you say that. I love that you say that. Let's talk about techniques and improving focus because we're so distracted.
Yeah.
The iPhone is there, the Android phone is there, the iPad is there, the computer is there, the gaming console with the Xbox, the PS5 is there.
Hmm.
How do we improve focus, but in a high pressure situation?
Look, my biggest advice for everyone, I call it the 5-minute mind. If you can sit in stillness for 5 minutes a day, every day, you will change the neural pathways in your brain that will allow you to feel calmer, have more creativity, have more clarity, better decision making. It really works. And people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, trust me, like, just sit in stillness. And eventually that 5 minutes will turn into 7 to 10. And you take time for yourself. And then when you incorporate a breathing routine into that, and intentional breathing is the most important skill to have. People look at me and they're like, breathe all the time. I'm like, yeah, but are you thinking about breathing? And so I train people to do this when they're not in stressful situations, because when they show up in a high pressure situation, they already know that they're at a baseline calmer because they've been implementing this already. But if they get heightened, they now can implement a skill that they know and start doing the breathing and find kind of some footing and grounding. And then they're going to be able to perform better.
Great point. Great outtake. Um, hmm. I see coaches, right? Coaches. I want to speak to the coaches here. And I know you're going to be able to answer this because you've seen it all. You've been in that wheelhouse. I see coaches, some of them, will look at the young students of the game coming in. And a lot of them are hard-nosed, hardwired, in-your-face, old-school mentality. Then you have some new coaches that are more, it's a participation. You're okay. You're going to do what you need to get to. When you look at both sides of the scale, is one beneficial from the other?
Yeah. So I teach a lot about this, right? I kind of say, create a culture of care for culture champions. And when people first hear that, they think it's this left side of the continuum that you talked about, the second side, which is all like, oh, everything's soft and everyone gets a ribbon and a participation trophy. And it's like, no, no. Like, I want you to have a standard of excellence. I want you to have expectations. The whole process of sport is based on win or loss. And jobs are based on win or loss, and money and contracts and scholarships are all based on performance. We have to be, just name it for what it is. You have to perform successfully to maintain in this field of sport. And so, okay, how do we do that now? So I want you to set the standard. I want you to have the values. But the other part is you're you're with humans. And so you have to know the emotional impact that you have in order to get them to thrive. You have to take time and say, hey, everyone learns differently. Everyone responds differently. And good coaches coach humans. They don't just coach to a team. And there's a difference behind that. And so you have to actually take the time to understand humans and care for a human with a standard of excellence.
Hmm. Whew. That's a Phil Jackson effect right there. Think about it. We go back to Michael Jordan. Like
Mhm.
Michael was his own person, Scotty was his own person,
Dennis
and then
Rodman was
Dennis
his person.
Rodman was in a Rubik's cube of personalities.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? If he came into the podcast, I say the exact same thing, and he'd be like, "You're right, Rory and Hillary. I was." You know what I mean?
And
Because
that's who
it's
I
the truth.
am. And I thrived by being who I was.
Facts. You
Cool.
know, and I think that you sometimes when you have those combustible elements of folks, I feel like a lot of folks will speak about Draymond Green, right? That plays for Golden State. Oh, he gets so many technicals. He's got a bad attitude. He's got this. He's got that. But Steve Kerr knows how to coach him. He knows how to coach him because the nucleus of his ability playing for the Warriors is so important because it's a plug and play system, but he is the glue of that team. That's why they wouldn't necessarily trade him because he's the guy that can get the ball, bring the ball down the court, pass it to Steph, or when Clay was on the team. Now you got Steph and you got Jimmy Butler. Think about what it is I'm saying here, guys, is that you have to look at the coaching ability of some of these players and let them be them. I know that.
And Steve Kerr will hold players accountable and set a standard of, even if he knows you're going to be a player that's going to push the boundaries a little bit, punch a teammate, for example, that might exist. We're going to still hold you accountable and not just give you a fine, but we're going to set an example out of you because you're creating a culture of what is allowed and what isn't allowed, even if your role in that team is to be a little bit more of the aggressor, right? Versus a facilitator versus the rah-rah guy. Like, everyone has a role and you can coach that role because you know that's your formula for success, but you still have a standard, you still have expectations, and you still have accountability of right and wrong.
Facts. Love that you say that. Speak to, because I have a lot of different, men and women, some children, some coaches, some parents will watch this. Speak to championship DNA. What does that mean from your point of view, from a psychologist?
Yeah. So for me, I'm all about building a champion to then build championships. And so every individual has to say, okay, what are my core values? What are my strengths that I can really bring out? And it goes back to self-awareness. Like, if you know you're not the most skilled player because you weren't born with natural talent, but you have a work ethic and you have a learning and you have a drive for that. Okay, let's build upon that because sometimes work will outplay and win over talent. But we also have to say, okay, but what am I also really good at? Am I a communicator? Am I a facilitator? Like, how can I really strengthen my roles and build upon the strengths and then grow the weaknesses? But I want everyone to say, this is what my dream is. Go for your dream because everything along the way is like another goal to get there. And so I want people to be dreamers. I want them to say, this sounds crazy, but I want to be in the NBA one day. Awesome. You might not ever make it to the NBA, but you might make it far further than you thought because you had that dream and you worked hard to get there. And now you might play at a really great high D1 level and have a great education and feel really proud of yourself. And you were a champion because you worked through that discipline.
How did you apply championship DNA to your business?
So I have a standard of excellence, and we sit down and we have what our long-term outcomes are for the year. But for me, it's also about building the team, building the people. And so I individually check in with what's everyone's personal goals. What are we working together as the philosophy? We have a we language that we are not just one who's a provider, but we are a team. We represent each other. We build each other up. And then not just individual check-ins, but then we do group check-ins. And then I'm trying to facilitate where I'm not the only person they come to learn, but they have 6 other teammates that they're like, hey, how did you do this? Or, hey, this was really hard for me. How could I be better in this area? Or help me collaborate in this process. And so now everyone is functioning together to learn, to grow, to then help reach their outcome goals for them, which is helping other people.
No, I love that because it's so needed. Like, you see it even in the corporate world, and I have some guys that will talk about the high upper end of the corporate world. There's a team foundation, but is the team foundation really there? Right? Because it's kind of like a lot of do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. But where's the actual building blocks? Are you actually listening to want to change the situations that are going on? Or are you just slapping things down on the Band-Aid effect and be like, this is what we're doing and this is what we're going to get to. And we label things as satisfactory when we hit our targets and our margins. I'm just like, I think that's a low level mindset personally. I don't care what business, what corporation you're in. I confidently will say that. I know I'm probably going to get some heat for saying that, but you have to be, if you want to stand out, you got to strip away certain principles. It's just how it is. There's truth in the serum. There's truth in what is being said. David Goggins said it best. Success leaves clues. But too many times, some folks want to copy and paste what it is they're doing and go, it's satisfactory for our goals. Well,
Right.
you're missing the point. You're missing your clientele. You're missing the people that want to build into the infrastructure,
Hmm.
you know? Before we get out of here, because I got a couple more things I want to get into, right? The book, because you're a
Yeah.
creator.
Hmm.
Speak to one of the most difficult moments writing that book. And what did you uncover and learn about yourself?
So writing the book was a great process, but the audio recording of the book was actually way harder than I realized. And I think it took me 10 to 15 takes reading the last two sentences of the book because I just had such I wanted to have it like such a punch, such an impact, such like a movement. Like I had such care and passion for this book and I was like I want these readers to be like, yes, and like slam the book down and be like, we're going to go make some change. I feel this. And so it was hard to be like, can I portray the emotions that I felt when writing this? And are you going to feel my emotions through words? So the audiobook, that was a challenge. And then there was times reading it out loud that a chapter would hit me that I had no idea that was going to give me some emotional impact. It wasn't what was emotional when I was writing it, but then reading it back, I was like, whew, that one hit me today in a different spot. So I think I learned something new every single time I read it. And when I hear quotes back read to me, when people are like reading a quote back to me, like, oh man, that sounds really good. I didn't know I wrote that part. Like it's a funny reflection that you're like, wow, those words really do have power. And I think that's the beautiful part of creating and hearing it and relearning and re-engaging in the work that you've done is you get to learn and feel stuff differently every time you go back to it.
And it's this is what it's all about. Like, I know that I feel like it's the cool thing now for a lot of folks to become an author. So they write a
Yeah.
book and they have their dreams and things like that. And I think there's some folks that want to be an author to create transformational experiences. And
Hmm.
then there's some that want to be an author to then have that knowledge panel. Well, I'm an author. You know what I mean? It's kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like that
yeah.
self-stroking, rewarding ego. But the thing is, when you become an author, there's so many other avenues in marketing that opens up:
Hmm. Hmm.
speaking gigs, podcast appearances, book signings.
Yeah.
Getting into different elements and places and things like that. And I don't think folks look at, like, if you want to be an author, tell your story that's going to create a transformational experience. You
Yes.
get what I mean?
And it's funny because I did that. I was writing this for what I wanted, a bigger purpose. I wanted change, I wanted impact, I wanted to continue the messaging, right? This builds off a TEDx I did in 2018. So, I did something in 2018, 5 years later I do this book. I've been speaking about all these things all the time. So when I sit back and they're like, you wrote a book, you're an author. Like for me, like, oh yeah, I wrote a book. Like it's not about the book for me. It's more the words in the message in that and the impact it can have. And I think that's what you're speaking of. Like those that do it for that reason, then your message lives far longer than just 165 pages in a book.
Right? I know some folks around me that are getting into prime writing right now, and I believe they're gonna shake the game and change the
Mhm.
game. And then it's like, once you encompass this thing of creation and ideation, it's a no brainer if you strategically approach it the right way,
Yeah.
right? Don't necessarily use it for the vanity metrics, because I think, again, it's like some people want that title, that
Yeah.
self of like, oh, I'm this, I did this. So now you got to treat me a certain way. It's no, build the levels of the Tetris board and say to yourself is, I'm an author. What can that now transition to? What can that now
Mhm.
transition to? Transition, right?
Mhm.
Because then you get into some cool places.
Yeah.
I know a couple authors that have come on this podcast, and now they're sitting on stages with like some big, well-named
So
folks
cool. Yeah.
because of just of the vice grip ability that they want. And like, I get goosebumps talking
Yeah.
about this because I'm
Yeah.
like, we're all gonna get there.
Mhm.
Consistency over everything. You got to just chip away at the foundation day after day after day, because you don't know if you're one video, one message, one podcast away from having your life just change completely
Right.
for all the great things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. One person can listen to one thing and they're like, oh, I need to go talk to that person. Right. And they're going to know someone else. Like we're all 6 degrees separated somehow, which is a beautiful, crazy thing if you think about it. But you're like, man, how did I connected to you? Oh, through here, through here, through here. And you're like, wow, that's a crazy story.
hmm Not to put you on the spot with this last question, because I think it's something that where we're at in our age, we understand because we've seen all the greats. And then now you have the younger generation that's growing up. I understand social media is a big thing, but I feel like there's some athletes, I'm not going to say per se any, but the way I'm going to address this question and frame it to you is when you look at the old school generation before social media and now this new school generation, do you feel like there's a type of diva mentality where it's like, I have my phone here, I want to take all the snapshots of everything, and they're now getting distracted? Versus the hard-nosed guys that were like, listen, I'm stepping on that court, I'm stepping on that field. It's all about wins, domination, domination. Does that make sense?
I think it's a misperception of generational gap, right? Because those that are the old school guys who didn't have that or got that when they were like 15, 8, whatever age they were, right? They utilized it as a learning tool later on and had to learn how to work with it. And it changed them because they weren't used to kind of posting and connecting and having that be there. The players now, the younger ones, this has been in their world. It's like what they know, right? Their parents have been taking photos of them since they're kids. Like they've learned how to navigate it. They've had to actually utilize it now because sport is a business and it's a brand and it's a marketing tool. And so I'm not going to say that these guys aren't locked in, or they're locked in less compared to the guys that we knew were just grinding, because we actually don't know what those guys were doing, because that's also a perception of what they told us they were doing. We actually now can live see certain aspects of behavior if you're filming and you actually can see the work. And so I actually feel like that's just a misperception. These guys are utilizing it as a tool, as a part of their business. And in fact, I work with these pro players to say, when are you on building the brand? When are you off to decompress for yourself, to isolate, to like remove yourself? When are you working for you? When are you working as a team? And it's actually like time blocking to have them be effective. And the funny part is some authentic humans, the player is what you see live on a screen. And that's who they are if you meet them at a coffee shop. If they weren't wearing a jersey, like that's them. Other people put on a persona that is created from the perception of other people, and that becomes the representation of who they are externally. And it's a job. They're a host, they're a marketer, they're a broadcaster. But them as a human is far different. And so it's an act, right? You just put on your work clothes and you go put it on. So I think we have to actually step back and say, I actually need to see what their work they're doing. And this is a part of the evolution of technology and what we have accessibility to. And if performance is performing, who are we to judge how they're doing it?
I love that you say that because I feel like it depends. Because the reason why I ask this question, I look at a couple of UFC guys, right? If folks look at their big channel, I'm not going to say the names, right? Just because I just don't want to say the names because people are going to come for me. But I look at some of past champions. And now that they became content creators, I don't think they take that fight game as serious because now it's like, I get it. Something has to give. Doing a podcast or doing speaking and then doing training, then doing workout, then doing this, then doing media, then doing all this. I understand you're building up your brand, but how focused are you on the fight game? Hitting pads is a lot different from than actually breaking down fights or doing your gaming. It's like you got to have certain valves shut completely off. You know what I mean? Because then it becomes distraction,
Or you have a team who helps you and you're not the one doing it all. And so that's why I said we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. But to those people that maybe now are shifting to be the brand, that might be their goal and their purpose and their focus, and they're still winning, right? And so that's why I say, like, let's look at the metrics of performance. And if we want to look at how it shows up on the field, that's one way for us to measure it. If we want to look at how it shows up on a social media platform and the impact there, cool, that's also performance. It's just a matter of which avenue that person wants to go in, but they're still performing.
No, love it. Love it. Love everything you said. Because I think it's like we want to see the stories of our favorite athletes, or influencers or our actors and actresses. But there's sometimes when you got to scale it back and give back to yourself, because to get to where you want to get to, I'm telling you, you got to do with a lot of sacrifices. Me and you both know that. Mm-hmm. Got to create these sacrifices. Sometimes you're missing birthday parties. You're missing these events because you want to get to the greater of what it is you want to get to. And then some folks are like, well, you're just into your business. You're into your stuff. Well, I'm into this because I know what it is I want. So I'm going to get there by any means necessary.
Right. But that's why those that are great don't fit in a box.
Hillary, Dr. Hillary. Plug the information for the book. Plug all your social media channels. They will be in the description, ladies and gentlemen. And support the creator
Mm-hmm.
and give it back to you.
Yes, the book is called Hello Trauma, Our Invisible Teammate. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes& & Noble, Audible. Please, if you do get it, leave a review. It's so helpful. Tag me on Instagram on Dr. C Mindset. I'd love to connect with you and hear the impact. Also, if you go to my website, www.txopps.com, I have tons of blogs, webinars, things for you to get in to learn on your own, all virtual stuff. So that's really great. The team's doing really cool things there. We have mastermind events coming up, so you can kind of find something that might really be intriguing for you. And then lastly, tune into the podcast, Highs and Lows of X's and O's. It's on Apple. And we also have a YouTube channel, Controlled Chaos Network.
There you go. Let's talk about that. See, I could hit my soundboard with the horns.
Yeah.
You know, right? But no, it speaks to just love sitting in this space, you know, just a long story or short story long or whatever you want to say. A couple great creators out of the Toronto area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Money Buys Happiness. We were chatting and we were in studio. And one of the representatives for the team said, you know, dude, I watch you encompass this thing on the podcast. And he goes, I see all the guests that you get on. And he goes, we're looking at it where we're like, we get these high prolific folks that have been on other shows. So it's hard to make the content, but you have to know it from an organic situation. And he goes, I look at you, but he's like, I see the guys that you bring in studio, the ones that you're doing in virtual. And the first thing they said is, you see that you get it. And that's some of the things that folks are like, well, how's he getting that person that's never been on a podcast? But they have all these accolades. It's not about the accolades, people. It's just about building fucking relationships that's going to be transformational. So I appreciate you, Dr. Hillary.
I appreciate you too. And I think the energy and vibe we connect with, right? Like that, it sparks and speaks the passion we have. And I think that's beautiful, is that if they can hear that with us, then we know we've helped other people, because we just get to live out our dreams doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you. And like I said, folks, like, share, subscribe, comment, listen. Dr. Hillary, go to her, all the links that are there in the description. Go to them, right? Click on them. You have Audible, buy the book, give it a review, and we out of here. I appreciate you.
Thank you.